Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Amanda and today we're going to be chatting through some of my recent favorite reads. So instead of doing a wrap up, which I truly just despise filming, I don't know what it is about wrap-ups that I just don't like. So to compromise, I really want to do recent reads videos where I just talk about the best of the best, the creme de la creme of my reading. So from October until now, these are the recent 4 and 5-star reads that I have had that I have truly loved. And I also want to say that these 4 stars are like bordering on 5. Like, they're really good books. They just didn't quite hit 5 for me, but I would still say they are super good. But there are also 4 stars that I give that are like, they're good, but like they're not as good as these books. So it's kind of confusing, I know, having a star rating that means like 2 different things, but I hope y'all know what I mean. Like, I feel like a 4 star could really go either way. But without further ado, let's get into the books. The first book we're going to talk about is Out There Screaming, edited by Jordan Peele. This is a short story collection and anthology of Black horror, and this came out in October. I read it in October and I devoured it. I read a story every single morning and it was so fun. I really liked reading a story every day. I liked so many of these stories, and I think the collection is really well developed, and it wasn't putting all the best stories at the beginning or all the best stories at the end. I feel like it had a really good mixture, at least for me, of stories that I loved and stories that I didn't love as much either, which I feel like is just inevitable with every short story collection. But I really liked this one a lot. I ended up giving it a very high 4 star. I really liked it. I tabbed every story. I just loved it. So if you're looking for some more horror to add to your collection, I would definitely check this one out. And even if you're not a big fan of anthologies, like I'm not the biggest fan, then I would still recommend picking this one up, because I feel like it's a fun way to taste test authors to see if they're going to be your taste. But I also feel like this collection is really good for people who may not like anthologies, because it is such a good collection. Like, there is so many good stories. There was very few that I actually didn't like that much, so would highly recommend this. It was so good. The next book we're going to talk about is one that does not have a cover currently. It's being polished up right now and will be out for release soon, and that is Crown of Sorrows by R.E. Palmer. I loved this book. This is book 4 in the Song of Echoes series. This is the 4th and second to last book in the series, and I have really love this series. This 4th one I think is my absolute favorite. I think the author has really developed this world and these characters so well over the span of these books, and this one is by far the best. I think it's the best written. I think it has the best mixture of battle scenes and in more like intimate moments with our characters, like having a deeper connection with one another and furthering those relationships. And it was just so good. Like, I just love it, and I feel like it was the perfect blend of everything that I want to see in fantasy. So give this one a glowing 4-star review. I truly enjoyed this one so much, and I would highly recommend this series, not only because I've been beta reading it, but it's an indie pub fantasy and I think it deserves more attention. It's really good. I would definitely recommend. Next up is God Killer, which I read at some point. I can't even remember when, but I loved this book so much so that I did order the Illuminate special edition of book 2. So in God Killer, we are following 3 different perspectives, and they all kind of weave together, but they all start out very separate, and we learn about what God killers are and how everyone views that viewpoint differently. Like, there's some people who believe that they should be killing the gods because they are a destructive force in this world, and others believe that the gods should be worshipped and continue to be worshipped. And it's just a really interesting relationship between all these different characters, and I devoured it. It was really good. The audiobook was amazing. I believe, if I remember correctly, there were different different narrators for each of the perspectives, and I just devoured it. It was just so good and so well written, and I just love the characters so much that I am very much looking forward to book 2. Next up is Last to Leave the Room by, I'm forgetting her name, but you'll be seeing the cover on the screen. I also chose to do just covers on the screen because grabbing the books is part of the problem with wrap-ups for me. Like, I just hate having to put them away afterwards. So if I don't have to grab them, then it's not too big of a deal. So Last to Leave the Room is a book that I got in the Evernight subscription box, and I'm challenging myself to read every single book I get in that box as soon as I get it, so I do not fall behind. So I read this book as soon as I got it, and I loved it. So we follow our main character, who is a scientist working for this company that is working on this project, and I can't quite remember what the project was, but it was something substantial that was like affecting people's lives. And one day she goes down to her basement and sees something down there. There's a door that has appeared there that was not there the day before, and so she approaches this door and she just gets this like overwhelming feeling and just like backs off and like, never mind, you know, we'll just see this in the morning. And so the next day the door is gone and interesting things start happening, and then like the door is back and it's just weird. Like, it just gets really weird, and I really liked it. Like, I like weird horror, and this definitely went there. It was definitely a pretty slow book. It was a pretty slow build up, and I feel like it pays off in the end if you do stick with it. I do feel like it pays off, and I quite enjoyed this one a lot. I thought it was a great horror read. I thought it was really fun, and I had a great time reading it, so I would highly recommend. It was really good. Of course, we have to talk about Fourth Wing. I did read this, and I will say it is not the best thing I've ever read, first and foremost. It is definitely very stereotypical every other YA book I've ever read in my entire life, but there's something very compelling about this book, and I don't know quite what it is, like if it's the characters or the way it's written or what, but there was something that just kept me flipping the pages, and I found this book really hard to put down. Like, I am currently reading like a book that is really hard for me to pick up because it's kind of boring and I'm not super loving it, and so books like that make it hard for me to keep reading. But this book was like candy. I just couldn't stop, and I just had to keep going until it was done. So I don't need to explain what this book is about, y'all know, but I liked it. I mean, I think it's fun. Like, I think it's a fun book. I will be reading Iron Flame at some point because I did buy a copy. I do want to see what the heck is going to happen in that, but I don't have the highest of hopes for it. I've heard people say that it's atrociously bad and that she should have taken her time more with Iron Flame, which I can already agree on because Fourth Wing came out earlier this year, and then we already have like a 600+ page sequel coming out, like not more than like 6-7 months later. So that just seems rushed to me. Even if she had that draft mostly done, I feel like she should have waited and have it come out like around the same time next year as Fourth Wing, just to give herself more time to polish up the story. That's just what I would think, not even having read the book, but I guess I will see once I get into it, because on the Discord that I'm on, I'm seeing lots of people DNF it or give it low ratings, so we'll just see where I stand on that. Next up is Fractal Noise, which is the prequel to Sleep in a Sea of Stars. I love this prequel so much. The audiobook is a work of art. There is sound effects, and they have different like voices, kind of like when they are talking to each other through their helmets, because this book is set in space. So there's like this audio effect that happens where it sounds kind of muffled or like coming through a speaker, but I absolutely love that. And throughout the story, there's this really ominous thudding that keeps happening, and in the book it's like super huge font, because I did flip through the book just to see what it would look like, and it's like super large font. But in the audiobook they actually make this like reverberating thud sound, and it's really scary because you'll just be listening along, you know, doing your chores, and then suddenly there's this like thud, and it's like, whoa. Which is just like how the characters are experiencing it, because we follow this crew who is going to explore this really mysterious thing out in space, and a lot of the crew is like, we really shouldn't do this, but then the other half is like, well, we are a research crew, we need to go, you know, research, and part of that research is to go look at these things and see what's up and do their sciencey thing. So I really enjoyed this. I almost liked it more than To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. Like, I think it's better. Like, I don't know, I feel like this series would be better if it was like novellas, like almost like Wayward Children series length of novellas of just following different crew members in space or whatever. So I don't know what Christopher Paolini plans to do with this series, because this is the prequel, so I don't know. Like, then he wrote, like, you know, a 900-page book, To Sleep in a Sea of Stars. So I don't know if that's it or if he's planning on doing more, but I've enjoyed what I've read so far, and I definitely recommend, especially reading this one. And then I think you'd get a nice taste of what To Sleep in a Sea of Stars would be like. But Fractal Noise was just amazing. I would say you should read that regardless, because it was a really good book. And I feel like it stands on its own pretty well. Next up, we have Notes on an Execution, which I read for a book club that I'm a part of, and I loved this book so much. And I loved it in a way that I just loved how the author wrote this book and how she portrayed this story. So we follow a couple different perspectives. Like, every other chapter we follow a different character, and in between those chapters we also follow what starts at 12 hours and from there goes from 12 to 11, 10, and so on. And we're following this second person perspective who is on death row, and they have 12 hours until they are executed, and we're following them each hour leading up to that execution, and also how they ended up in this position, what happened, and all the perspectives we follow somehow relate back to that person. And it was just like, it was complicated, it was messy, and ultimately I feel like this book is about, are people inherently good or are they inherently bad? And I really like that conversation because I just feel like it could go on for hours. And I really enjoyed how this author did not try to sway readers into thinking one way or the other. Like, she was not writing about this person on death row to be like a good person and that they don't deserve this. Like, she didn't write it like that. And she also didn't write it that they are a bad person and do deserve it. Like, it's really, do they? Don't they? Like, it's hard to tell. Like, at some points I'm like, no, they don't. But then at others I'm like, yes, they do. So it's like, I like that complicated feeling I have about this book. And so I ended up giving this 5 stars because I just couldn't not. I just feel like it's so well executed, ironically enough. And I just think it was a really well done book and would highly recommend. The audiobook is also really good. They do have a different narrator for the second person perspective and the other characters that you follow. So I just truly enjoyed it and I just flew through it. Next up we have Yellowface, which I just recently read in November, and oh my goodness, it was a ride. It was a ride. So I found myself like listening to this audiobook. I was cat sitting at the time, and I would stop in the middle of whatever chore I was doing and just be like I truly was just like appalled by some of the actions that this character took, and I'm like, dang girl, you are crazy. So if you were unfamiliar with this title, we are following our main character who, as usual, no clue what her name is, but her and her best friend are both part of the publishing world, and her best friend, Athena, I remember her name, I don't know why I can't remember the main character, but Athena is a flourishing author. She is making so much money on her books. She has everything that our main character wants, and so our main character is very jealous. Like, she thinks that she deserves to be where Athena's at and that she's not getting the recognition that she deserves. She's also an author, but she's only sold like a couple thousand books. She has nowhere near the amount of money that Athena has from her books, and just feels really distraught over how she's doing in the publishing world. So with a freak accident that happens, Athena dies, and our main character just happens to kind of be there when it happens, and she ends up stealing an unfinished manuscript from Athena and takes it home with her and rationalizes to herself, like, you know, Athena would want me to finish this for her. She would want me to get this out into the world for people to read. And, you know, I might as well just like edit it a little bit, you know, make it a little bit better better. I'll just delete that whole chapter, like rewrite that a little bit, and publish it under an ambiguous name that's not my own. So that's what our main character does. From there, we follow her from her repercussions of her actions, and it was wow. I don't even have the words to describe it. It was just phenomenally written, and it was also like so well written to the point where I was almost like in agreement with our main character. I'm almost like, yeah, go for it. I think our main character's name is June, actually, now that I'm talking about it. But I feel like I was like, oh yeah, totally. Like, I feel like the way R.F. Kuang wrote this book, it's really easy to emphasize with our main character. Like, it's really easy to be like, oh yeah, she's really having it rough, and you know, she's really doing the right thing. And then you like take a couple steps back, kind of zoom out from the story, and it's like, wait, she stole that, published it under an ambiguous name that people are making assumptions about her being a different race, and the whole story was about a war, I believe, that happened that is really obscure and not really talked about in like general classrooms and stuff. So that's what the book was about, and June made it all about somebody else and something else and totally disregarded the message that Athena was originally trying to portray. And it's real interesting, and it talks so much about cancel culture and the online book community and publishing as an industry, and I think it's a phenomenal book. I think it was really well done. I really enjoyed it and would highly recommend. I think the audiobook is also really fun because you're getting it from like, it's one person perspective or single, whatever I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? I think single person perspective, one person perspective. I don't know what I'm trying to say, but you get it. So yeah, I liked it a lot, and I think the audiobook worked well because I can see where reading it physically it'd be overwhelming to be in June's head, because she's just kind of annoying and she just has a lot of annoying thoughts, honestly. So I feel like the audiobook worked well because I just got to hear her, and I could almost like tune out some of her annoying like tendencies that she had, I guess. So anyways, it was real good and I definitely recommend. And the last book we're going to talk about is A Day of Fallen Night. You guys, I love this book so much. Are we surprised? We shouldn't be surprised. If you don't know, or if you're new here, Priory of the Orange Tree, which is the first book in this series, is my absolute favorite book of all time. I bought that book the same day it came out. I read it in like 4 days. Don't ask me how I did it. I really don't know. Like, I swear, I like got all my homework done on like Friday, and then I just spent all weekend in my room reading that book. So I loved it. I loved it so much. And the prequel came out earlier this year, and I'm like, I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna read it. And then I never did. And so November came around, and I'm like, I cannot let this year go by without reading this book. So I read it, and I loved it. It was so good. I almost feel like it's better than Priory. I just feel like Samantha Shannon's writing is just so strong, and everything she writes is just phenomenal. So I just adored it. Honestly, I just loved it. And I feel like you could read this book or Priory first. I really don't think it matters. I know technically one goes before the other, but I obviously read Priory first and then A Day of Fallen Night, which I think is fun because then you know where Priory stands at the beginning. And then you see how that book ends. But then you like go back in history and read about these other characters, and it's like, oh wow, fascinating. And then it like all ties in and makes so much sense with Priory. So I'm definitely gonna do a reread of one or both of those books before book 2 comes out to kind of just get like the whole picture, which I'm really looking forward to. So that is going to be it for my recent reads. Those are just like the creme de la creme of the books that I have been reading recently and have just absolutely loved and can't stop thinking about. So let me know if any books you have read recently fit into that as well, as I would love to know, and I will see you all in another video soon. Goodbye!